10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello.
What's up?
Welcome to episode 23 of Your Brain on God. This is the first. This is the part one of our self-awareness series. We're going to be doing 3 parts. Really excited for this episode. It was awesome. We're talking about self-awareness and what it is, why it matters, and how God wants to partner with us in growing and going on that self-awareness journey. So listen in and enjoy.
Yep. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Wherever you are at.
Whatever time you are at.
Whatever time you're at right now in the time-space continuum, we'd like to welcome you to episode 23 of Your Brain on God. My goodness,
Woo.
little boggies.
Wow.
It's been a while.
It has.
Listen, we've been getting countless emails. Emails, text messages, phone calls, all right? Telemarketers telling us, Aaron, Darryl, when's the next episode of Your Brain on God coming out? I swear, if I had a nickel for every time I got a telemarketer just call me up, dude, I'm waiting for the next episode of Your Brain on God, I would be a millionaire.
You'd be broke.
because everyone's been waiting for episode 23 because we're coming out. So welcome back, family.
Yeah,
welcome back, all of our boggies out there.
Boggies, thank you for your patience.
Thank you for our patience. It's just been wild getting back in the mix, you know?
Yeah, summer's been kind of crazy.
We've been playing Halo. I'm going to be honest. There was one week where we literally didn't podcast because of Halo.
Just one, though.
Sponsor us, Halo. Can I just say that? We've been playing Xbox. We've been being creative, though. We've been making a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Summer camps happening.
Summer camps for youth have been happening.
Yeah.
It's just been wild. It's just been wild. But we're back in action, and we're so excited to be with you. And we're excited to actually start a new series together. For the next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about self-awareness. And it seems to be a pretty crucial thing that we talk about in most of our episodes, just being aware of what's going on inside of us. We're big on presence, big on self-awareness, but we wanted to do an entire series about what actually self-awareness is, what it means to be self-aware, and how it actually benefits and opens us up for our own personal growth and purpose in life and relationship with God, as well as with our relationships with other people. It's huge for our relationships with other people, and give you guys some tools that you can hop into so that you can become more self-aware. And so we're excited for these next 3 weeks to kind of really delve in. I like that word. Delve.
To delve.
Not just diving, okay, but delving. Yeah, it's like a super dive. A what?
Sublime.
Wait, what? What are you even saying?
From, the movie?
No.
Princess Bride.
Soup Life?
No, in Princess Bride when they fill, what's his name's? Wesley, his air with lung, and he pushes on him to see what his last words are gonna.
And what are they?
Say. He's saying "true love," I think.
but
then they're trying to decipher what he's actually saying. And when I was a kid, I just remember hearing them say "to blave," and then.
Wow, that was a very only Darryl joke. So I appreciate you saying that. But
no, somebody out there knew what I was referring to.
Yeah, okay. But somebody out there. But yeah, we're excited to jump into self-awareness. We're going to be talking about in this episode how self-awareness actually is a gift from God. That's something that He wants us to dive into. How we kind of open up ourselves to realize that we are a living being aware of ourselves, and then maybe some of the pain about jumping into self-awareness. But let's start it out.
Yeah.
Darryl, help us. Get us on the road.
Not a funny. I wouldn't call this a story. I don't think there's enough there.
Wait. Funny story. It's not funny, and it's not a story. Oh my gosh! I just jammed my knee against the thing. But
quick anecdote.
Yeah.
just the other day you were talking about how I think you were with Max, and he told you to look at your hand and just be aware of that you were the person moving your hand,
Yeah.
And
Which is a trip.
You just look at your hand and think about how you are making movement happen. You are the one who's pointing or turning your hand, wiggling your fingers, that it's you.
Boggies, here's what we want you to do right now. I just want you to take a quick pause.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome to Self-Awareness 101 with Aaron and Darryl, okay? Just take a look at your hand right now. Are you driving? Be careful, all right? Are you at home? Just take a look at your hand right now. Maybe front to back. Change around. Palm to what's the other side of the hand called?
Backhand.
Backhand. I don't know. The backhand. And become
Knuckle
aware that you have a hand.
You have a hand.
And that behind the hand is a deeper you.
It's you.
Wow. I just got blasted. That's good.
But it's a moment of recognizing that we are a self, that recognizing ourself, that we exist in this time and space as an individual person,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to read a definition from Oxford Dictionary. It says that self-awareness is this: conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of definitions. I think if you were to Google self-awareness, you'll find all kinds of things that will be explaining what self-awareness is.
Yeah.
And in the book Emotional Intelligence 2.0, the authors say that self-awareness, simply put, is this: to know oneself as you truly are.
Yeah.
To know yourself as you truly are. And if we were to go back when you were a baby, now think about this: you were just a few months old.
9 pounds, 11 ounces.
You were just a few months old.
Yeah.
Okay. And when we were babies, we had no concept of ourself, really,
Right.
as being an individual person. We didn't have we didn't have any kind of self-awareness when we were babies,
Mm-hmm.
right?
A recognition that
We couldn't recognize.
there was an otherness to us.
Yeah.
Even.
Right. We were just in life and stuff was happening, right?
Right.
I don't know how we would have thought about that at that age. But somehow the research shows that around 18 months, a child is able to start recognizing themselves a little bit more, like as a self. That this first experience of kind of self-awareness,
Right.
that I exist in this place with other people who also exist.
Right. And they wouldn't think about it like that, obviously.
No, they wouldn't think about it like that, but that experience starts to happen.
But you even have kids like that are even younger than that, looking at themselves in the mirror and kind of like, and they're not even, probably cognitive enough to realize that kind of thing, like that I have agency or something, but they can kind of see that might be me without actually thinking that might be me,
Right,
and then they start to realize like I'm actually a being, probably at the 18 months.
At that point, 18 months is generally when babies start recognizing that they are a person and there are other people, right? And so this very first kind of experience of coming into self-awareness immediately changes the way that we see ourselves and the way that we see other people.
Right.
Because now I am aware that I am an individual person and there is another individual person. I have my feelings and my experience. They have their feelings and their experience. Mm-hmm. And at the basis of self-awareness, I think that I know that we're not going to talk specifically right in this episode about how self-awareness impacts our relationships, but it's so integral to what self-awareness is and what it does.
Totally.
That it does affect the way that we relate with other people.
Totally.
But today we're focusing on how it affects us, right? As we discover ourselves, as we grow in self-awareness. What is self-awareness? What stops us from becoming more self-aware? And it's something that whenever I was younger, Whenever I was
Whenever
younger.
I was young.
When I was
Speaking
younger.
of
Self-awareness. I recently
Brittany-
discovered that every time I tell a story about when I was young, I say whenever I was young.
Brittany,
I've probably
his wife
been
was
doing
telling me
that my
about
whole
that.
life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my wife told me.
Yeah.
And now I have an increased level of self-awareness.
Yeah.
You know, that's something that I was not even aware I was doing, but that's improper English. And if anybody
Whenever I was
catching it
young-
on the podcast and you didn't say anything to me,
Yeah. Wow. Seriously, guys?
you know,
where are your comments?
I'm okay to increase my self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I want to do that.
yeah.
But when I was young, I found it so hard to ever express myself or identify feelings and put words to things that I was feeling, or even to identify anything good that I felt I was good at. I really struggled at identifying things I was good at. I can pick out things that I felt I wasn't good at, but I could hardly ever say anything that I was good at. And that happened until I was in college, until after I graduated high school. It still wasn't. I wouldn't really be able to express my strengths or the way that I'm wired, the beneficial things that I have naturally to me. And as I grew in self-awareness, I grew in confidence, and I grew in my ability to, relate with others, but also relate with myself.
Right.
I think self-awareness is huge because it impacts so much of our life. It
Right.
impacts so much of how we see ourselves, how we see the world around us.
Right.
And it impacts the way that we actually engage with the world around us.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
It changes the way that we engage with the world around us.
Right.
There's Dr. Don Clifton. He's like behind all the research for Strength Finders, which is a big self-awareness tool. But he said that if the only tool you have is a hammer, you'll treat every problem like a nail. And what he was saying is, if you don't think you have anything else to offer, you're going to treat everything the same. Right? You're only going to respond in the ways that you think you can respond. But as we increase self-awareness, we start to realize that we have other tools. Right? We don't have to treat every problem like a nail.
Right.
But we don't know that, and we just have a hammer, walk around with a hammer, smashing
Right.
things with a hammer.
Right.
And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But as
Right.
we increase self-awareness, we start to realize, wait, there are other problems. Not everything's a nail,
Right.
and I have other tools.
Right.
It's not just a hammer.
And we can see the effect of very clearly. You could probably think of a couple people maybe in your life, and maybe sometimes we are those people, but a couple people in our life that are not very self-aware and seem to wreak havoc in their lives everywhere they go. And everywhere they go, a storm follows with them because they're not really cognizant of how they're actually acting, what they're saying, aware of their own weaknesses or strengths, or maybe constantly trying to pawn off their weaknesses onto other people, projecting onto other people, kind of maybe even operating in environments or going after things that really aren't their wheelhouse. A classic one is, I remember watching like American Idol as a kid, and you would have like people that are just garbage singers thinking that they're the best, and that they've only ever been told that they're the best, unfortunately, by their families, by their mamas or whatever, but they get up there and they start singing, they think they're amazing, and they're absolutely garbage at what they're doing, right? And it's like, how does this person not know that they have a garby voice? You know what I mean? Like that they actually think that they could make it on American Idol, But I remember, thinking that as a kid. It is, you can find those people in our lives that, who really aren't aware of their strengths, their weaknesses, how they actually impact other people. They aren't aware of themselves, of what's actually going on with their emotions. They're not aware of what they're feeling. They project on other people, all these different kinds of things.
Yeah.
And it affects so much. It affects so much of life, like what you're saying. And I remember, if I can look back in high school, I wasn't a very self-aware kid at all. Looking back, I realized that the things I was struggling with were anxiety and terrible, terrible insecurity. And I was not even aware by any means that I had anxiety, or that, had anxiety, whatever, struggle with anxiety, or was insecure. I just thought that was the way to go. Like it was almost like I was aware, but I was unaware. Like I was experiencing the effects of insecurity without actually having language to define it or know what was actually going on inside me, right?
Yeah,
so I was operating in all of these anxious patterns, all these insecure patterns where I was trying to please people and trying to get them to like me and changing myself and being a chameleon in different situations based on other people's perceptions and wanting so desperately for people to like be proud of me and for me to be the funny guy or me to be the good skater, and even having all of these dreams all so that people could see me, and I wasn't even aware of it. I knew it was there, but I also didn't know it was there at the same time because I hadn't been, well, one, no one ever really told me that, you know what I mean? Or there was pride or blockages keeping me from knowing it. Whatever it was, I wasn't aware of what was actually going on inside of me, and it was diminishing the purpose, the way that I cared about myself, the way that I loved myself, the way that I saw myself, the way that, and then how I related to people as well, right? So it's like it had this whole just terrible stream of effects that and I wasn't even aware of that, So it's one danger to be aware of something or it's one danger to struggle with something or to be hurting people and to know it. It's a whole nother danger in itself to be, acting in a certain way and be hurting other people, but not know it at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's where self-awareness comes in as such a tool. It's such a crazy tool that God has given us,
Yeah. There's a phrase when we talk about self-awareness, there's a phrase called blind spots that most people are probably familiar with. We know about blind spots when we're like driving a car. When you learn to drive, you have to learn about the blind spots on your car, right? And you have to know how to be aware of your blind spots and when to check your blind spots. And if you don't do that, you could get into an accident because you're changing lanes and you don't see the person who's in your blind spot and you end up hitting them, or maybe somebody's wasn't in your blind spot and then you look away and then they zoom into it and then they're in their blind spot all of a sudden and you end up having an accident. But there's a few years ago, there's a study that showed that 850,000 accidents happen every year because of blind spots.
How many?
850,000.
850,000?
Yeah.
I thought you told me 850 before we started.
No, 850,000.
Are
so
you
like
freaking
almost
kidding
a million.
me? I wasn't about to cuss. I was just very passionate about that freaking.
Yeah, it's a lot of accidents happen every year just because of blind spots.
Holy moly! Yeah, that's crazy.
And we have technology now in cars that help with blind spots. To help people identify their blind spot, to be aware of their blind spots, let them know when it's dangerous if they're going to do something that moves into their blind spot. But the same thing happens with us when we don't increase self-awareness, right? We have blind spots that we aren't aware of, and we're operating one way, and then we move into a direction that moves into our blind spot, and we end up having an accident. Right. And sometimes we'll think, oh, it was their fault. That wasn't me. Right. But it might have been because we weren't aware of our blind spots. Right. And the blind spots that we have in our personal life can affect the people around us, but then it causes pain in our own life. Right. There is a quote by John Maxwell. He said that the greatest fool in life is the one who thinks they truly see themselves. And what he is saying is just that we can go through life, even when we go on a journey of self-awareness, right? We still are going to have blind spots. Right. And I think that's kind of the first step into what that even looks like, is like, well, we might not be aware that we have blind spots, like what you were saying, that you didn't realize it was insecurity. Same thing for me. I was really insecure. I didn't know it was insecurity until later on, and then I would recognize, wow, I've been really insecure. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's something that I didn't know was there. And until I went on the journey of self-awareness, I started recognizing, wow, I have some blind spots. Right. And we might be in a place where we feel like we are really self-aware, but as soon as we think that we are fully self-aware, we are probably in the most dangerous place. Right.
Yeah. It's like as soon as you think you've arrived,
Yes.
It probably shows you have a long way to go.
Yeah.
You know?
As soon as you think you arrived, it shows that you still have a long way to go.
Right.
Yes.
And it's this journey of growing and uncovering more and more of those blind spots, you know? And I think it's a journey that I think God wants us to go on, you know? I think he desires for his children, for his people, to step in to a sense of awareness of ourselves and to know ourselves, if that's the definition based on the emotional health, to truly know oneself. Like God wants us that, because it does keep us from so much that God has promised us, right? And so he wants us to step into this journey of uncovering those blind spots. I mean, he sure did it for the Pharisees. I mean, he was pointing out a lot of blind spots in other people, and I would say God, he has nothing hidden. There is no blind spot for God, and so he is the one that can actually show us where we are blind and open those things up. And he wants us to go on a journey of uncovering that. It says in what's the verse? It's in Proverbs
25. Verse 5.
Yeah, 20 verse 5, if you want to read it, Darryl.
It says, the intentions of a man's heart are deep waters, but a man of understanding draws them out.
Right. Or the purpose of a man as well. The intentions or the purpose of a man are like deep waters. And it is, what is it? A wise man that?
A man of understanding draws them out.
A man of understanding that draws them out. Yeah. And I think a lot of those things in us, as we grow, I'm still uncovering so many hidden things that I didn't even know, ways that I operate. But it is a man of understanding or a woman of understanding, of wisdom, to go and draw out those things that are hidden.
That are hidden deep within.
Right. And really, what we were talking about before we started recording is that God wants us to step into a journey of self-discovery, because we are made in his image. And so it kind of goes in like a flow. It's kind of cyclical. The more we know about God, the more we know about ourselves. And likewise, the more that we know about ourselves, the more that we can see the glory and the creation of God, or the intention or purpose of God for our lives. The more we become aware of some of those blind spots and even get to know ourselves, God knows us fully, right? I love that verse in Jeremiah where he says, like, even before you were born, I knew you, right? I formed you. Like, I know everything about you. And so actually, speaking about your brain on God, uncovering who we are allows us to think like God, or to see like God, or to know what God knows. It kind of gives us insight into his thoughts or his mind about us, about our created value, about who we were made to be, about his purpose for us, as we start to do the uncovering work of jumping into self-awareness. So it is while it's a physical and a psychological journey of uncovering things that maybe even our brain has, covered up from our past or whatever, or the ways that we operate. It is a very, very spiritual and biblical journey to step into. The wise man draws out the intentions and the wills, I would say the character traits, some of the maybe even yucky stuff, the evil stuff, the blind spots out of the heart. It is someone of understanding who goes on the journey to pull those things out to the surface so that they can be seen before God, so we can know ourselves.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that we can, and when we don't do that, we miss out on so much of what God has for us.
Right.
And on our relationship with God, right? Not even talking about our relationship with other people, but when we lack self-awareness, that affects our relationship with God.
Right.
Too, because that affects how we see ourselves, and that how we see ourselves determines how we're going to react and respond and behave in the world around us, right? And that includes with our relationship with God. There's a quote, a phrase, I don't know where this came from. It's probably been around for a long time, an old adage. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll think itself a fool.
Right.
Right? And if we are doing that with
Say
ourselves...
that one more time for the people.
One more time. This is for you, the people.
The people. We the people.
If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll think itself a fool.
Right.
Right? But I don't remember how the second half has to do with, but if you judge it by its ability to swim, something good's going to happen.
Right, yeah.
But if a fish is trying to climb a tree, and it thinks it's supposed to be climbing a tree because it sees a cat climbing a tree,
Right.
it's going to think that it's a failure.
Right.
It's going to think that it can't do anything.
Right.
That it doesn't amount to anything.
Right.
But the whole time it's not operating in the way that it's designed to.
Right.
And as we increase our own self-awareness, we start realizing how we were designed by God.
Right.
And how we can function and live in that purpose that he has set for us.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to grow in that awareness, right? And that literally changes our life.
Right.
Because we stop trying to climb trees.
Right.
And God is with us in that process, and he is with us, and he has placed so much value and so much gold, so much purpose inside of each and every individual. And it's all different,
Right.
He's uniquely created us and uniquely purposed us. And as we discover what he has created inside of us, the way that he has designed us, the way that he has set us apart, we can start living into that more and more and more.
Right.
But as long as we're living in ignorance of who we are, as long as we're convinced that there are only certain aspects to us, and we don't actually continue to grow in that awareness of self, we will feel defeated. We'll feel like we're wasting energy.
Right.
We're gonna have this experience of life that's just not what God intended for us.
Or we'll get ourselves caught up in a whole lot of stuff that's almost like wasted energy, or swimming upstream.
Right.
Like swimming upstream towards a purpose or towards a calling that we're not aware, that we're not actually wired for. Right. So we can get ourselves caught in a lot of sticky situations, or get caught. I mean, it happens so often of even not recognizing perhaps the needs that we have inside of us, or the motives that lead us into certain situations, into certain jobs, into certain pursuits for money, for fame, for followers, for relationships, for and we can end up swimming upstream and create needless battles for ourselves that are all because we're not aware of what actually is going on inside of us, and something that my counselor has been teaching us, and I think it's maybe like a Tony Robbins thing as well, but like of the 6 kind of human needs, where we need like significance, we need connection, we need variety, we need
certainty.
Oh my gosh, am I gonna blank?
We need contribution.
Is that the same thing as significance, or no? That's a separate one. Contribution.
The 6 are there's variety, or uncertainty is what he'll say. Certainty, uncertainty, significance, love and connection, contribution, and growth.
Awesome. Yeah. So you have these six human needs that we desire, and when we become aware, so what my counselor has led me to step into is to when I'm in a certain situation and certain things come up before I act out of a certain thing, to kind of sit and to be aware of what am I actually needing right now? Like, am I needing certainty because of like I'm getting anxiety, or am I getting bored with this because I need variety, right? And it's in the asking ourselves those questions that you start to see, what do I actually need? And then when you actually know what you need, you can make a proper decision that actually leads you into like the quote unquote right, or the best option for you in your purpose, in your calling, in the way that you operate in work, in kind of making decisions throughout the day, in even your emotional life, being aware of what do I actually need and how do I actually deal with these things. It opens up all of this stuff. So it's super important.
And on that note, I mean, this is something that Tony Robbins will talk about too, is that we can find unhealthy ways to get those needs met.
Right.
And if we are unaware that we are doing that, then we'll keep that cycle of unhealthy behavior.
Right.
Because we're behaving this way because we're getting this need met. Right. We need certainty. And so the way that we get certainty is trying to have control, to assert control over everything, and dominance. We start being very dominating and controlling because we have that need for certainty. Right. And that's an unhealthy way to get that need met.
Right.
Or maybe we needed variety, so we just never commit to anything, and there's these ways that we get these needs met. Tony Robbins gives a good example of somebody who grows up on the street and with the lifestyle that they know is to assert power over people, to take things whenever you want them. So like if a teenager is growing up on the street and he pulled out a gun and started mugging somebody, he's getting a lot of his needs met in that moment. Right. He has certainty. He knows he's going to get a response.
Right.
He has some uncertainty. He doesn't know exactly what's going to happen. There's some risk involved.
Right.
He feels very significant in that moment.
He has like the power.
Yeah, he has the power.
Right.
He's getting half of those 6 needs met in that one instance.
Right.
In that one behavior.
Right.
But is that a healthy way to get that met?
Right.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But if we continue in these behaviors that are meeting our needs in unhealthy ways without us knowing it, we will just continue to live in this cycle that's not going to be beneficial for us or anybody else. But when we grow in our awareness, in our self-awareness, and realize, what am I actually needing?
Right.
And how am I getting that need met?
Right.
That maybe I don't need to have these anger issues. Maybe it's not lashing out in anger because that's how I know to get this response. Right. But what am I actually needing? And when I can address that, I can make a difference for my own life and for the people around me.
Totally. Yeah, that's huge. I think a big problem with that, obviously, is in stepping into even uncovering some of those needs, we can realize a lot of dark things about ourselves, or a lot of hurtful things, broken things about ourselves, which is a painful process, right? And while it's God's gift to us to step into self-awareness, it is also a painful journey to kind of uncover some of these things in our own lives. And if it was easy, everyone would do it, and you would see, you would see everybody living according to that kind of process of like, oh, I think I'm needing this, so I'm going to get it from a healthy source rather than continuing this cycle that my family has continued for generations or whatever it is, right? So if it was an easy process, everyone would do it, and everyone would take a good evaluation and look at themselves and ask them proper questions. But what happens is in the uncovering, it's kind of like taking off a Band-Aid sometimes, right? And unhashing some old wounds or ways that we operate, or uncovering, man, I really operate out of insecurity a lot, and I don't even like the fact that I'm insecure, because I keep playing off that I'm not insecure and I'm actually very confident in front of people. So that's going to be a death. You know what I mean? That's going to be an emotional death, a social death. People might see me differently. I might see myself differently, and now I don't get to hold this kind of facade, you know what I mean, and stay in a lack of self-awareness, because another old adage I feel like we've used a lot, is that ignorance is bliss, there is an aspect of if I'm not aware of these things and I'm just kind of living by my natural instincts and going for it and not really caring, what's going on, you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. But it is easier maybe to live that way because you don't have to do the deep work of uncovering those things, So it's a painful process,
There was so whenever I was dating my wife,
I got confused there. Yeah. Brittany,
well, I guess we're still dating. We just went on a date last night. But before we got engaged, I was talking to my sister about it, and my sister and my wife are both ones on the Enneagram. I don't know if everybody knows much about it, but one's essentially something that they struggle with is a very loud inner critic, right? So they're often, people who are ones often resonate with the concept of finding all kinds of things wrong with themselves, right? Already critiquing themselves, already questioning their motives, already thinking maybe I'm not doing this right. But my sister, she knew that Brittany, my wife, Brittany, was a one. And I was talking with her about, just how much I loved Brittany and wanted to propose to her. And she said to me, she's like, I want to talk to you about something because I know that Brittany's the one, and this might be helpful for her too, if I actually express my experience. And she went on to say that there have been times in our conversations where she is, processing some stuff, and then I give some advice or I ask questions about things, that because she's already critiquing herself, when I say something that sounds like what she's already thinking, it just intensifies that self-criticalness, right? And so when I said things that sounded like it could be judgmental, or if I said something that could sound like I'm giving a correction or thinking like, oh, well, here's a better way to do it, that was a very hard experience for her, right? And I had no idea that I was doing that, right? I didn't realize that that whenever I was trying to help, I was making it worse.
Right.
But if I didn't have that experience with my sister telling me that, and I'm so grateful, I wouldn't have increased my self-awareness and become aware of, okay, I need to be intentional, because when I do this thing and this behavior, I'm actually causing pain.
Right.
When I'm trying to help, I thought it was going to be a helpful thing,
Right.
but it was actually causing pain. And there are probably a lot of things in my own life where I think I'm helping and I'm not. I'm just ignorant. I'm ignorant to the fact. So ignorance is bliss in that sense. I'm thinking everything's good and fine. Yeah, that was a great thing I said to that person. But in reality, if I go on with that kind of behavior, not knowing my impact on other people, on my sister, and what that's gonna affect me in my relationships, right? But I grew in self-awareness in that moment because I was open to hearing something. But I think the reason I thought of that was because it's uncomfortable.
Right.
It's never comfortable to be told that what you're doing is not doing what you think it's doing. Right.
Especially when you're trying to love, or you feel like you have the right idea of what love looks like in a situation, and someone's like, hey, just so you know, what you're doing and you think it's working is actually not. It's like, yeah.
And that hurts. You know, it hurts for us to grow in self-awareness sometimes.
Right.
It's painful. It feels like, but that's not what I was wanting to happen. And we have a moment to choose, in that moment, I could have chose to say, well, you're just being defensive. I have good advice to share. Right. And that wouldn't have been helpful, but I could have taken that stance of just been like really hard on what I wanted to do and focused on me. But as I want to love well, I have to grow in self-awareness. And even if to love myself, I have to grow in self-awareness to love myself too. Right. But it's uncomfortable. It is. It's painful. Right. It's uncomfortable. It's challenging. And if we can't first accept those experiences, we probably won't grow in self-awareness. Right. If we're not okay with being wrong, if we're not okay with being called out on something, right. If we're not okay with being imperfect, right. We can hold ourselves to this expectation that we need to be perfect. And so whenever we're not perfect, we get defensive, And
that's what I was just going to talk about is the idea that self-awareness shows us, and we have a weird view in our minds of what perfection is. And for somewhere along the line, we got this idea that perfection was just like doing everything like, well, perfectly, but our view of I don't even know how to really explain it, but like everything to a T, like everything's just like immaculate, like we have everything just like locked into, and I don't even think that's what necessarily perfection looks like or whatever.
It's just there is no such thing as perfection.
Yeah.
Because it's different for every person.
Yeah, it's different for every person. But what self-awareness does is it shows us that in some way there are flaws in us, and whatever our view of perfection is, or our ideal self-awareness allows us to see that we may not be operating according to how we want to operate, or our idealistic self is operating, or, like you said, like becoming aware that I thought I was operating in this way and I thought I was doing good, but I'm not. You know what I mean?
Right,
that is a painful thing to experience. And I think we all have to come to the terms at some point in our lives that I am not a perfect being, that that is a painful experience to realize that I have flaws. It is painful for me to realize that my tendency when I experience pain is to run to escape to something. I don't want to be that.
Right.
Right? And I don't want that to be my tendency, that I run to distraction, or I run to addiction, or whatever it is, or I get caught up in something, or I don't want to be that guy. But I have to realize that in some way, I have a tendency to run away from feelings and to go there. Do I want to admit that? Not really. Do I want to be different than that? Absolutely. But in order to grow out of that, I have to realize, for my own sake, I have to step into the uncomfortability of that awareness. Hey, man, oftentimes when I have an uncomfortable emotion, I put this over it and I pretend like everything's okay. You know what I mean? Right. Or I just am running, or I often run to distraction. I could just be on my phone for hours, just do it, and I'm not dealing with anything. And it's like, to even admit that is like, hey, I don't even have the right ways of dealing with things a lot of the time. So you know what I mean? Totally. I want to be someone who's just like, I run to Jesus all the time, and you know what I mean? And I'm just solid, but I'm not there. And so, but the self-awareness allows me, and that's painful. You know what I mean?
To recognize that we're not who we want to be.
Just this last week, realizing, oh my gosh, there's so many ways this week that I've just run away from my emotions. But what's good about it is that I've taken that opportunity, becoming aware of that, and then I've sat with my emotions and said, and actually dealt with the uncomfortability of, this is painful. I've been stressed out about this. This is going on, and I kind of have anger towards this person, or I'm realizing that I'm not being very compassionate this week, and I'm not living according to how I want to live, and I'm still doing this even though I don't want to. It's like, it's like, but with all that said, there is hope in that, because in the death of some of those things comes a greater reality that you can grow and become a person that is actually more solid than if I was to just pretend like everything was okay.
Right.
And this is something that I had a thought in while we've been talking, is that there is a difference between self-awareness and self-consciousness. Right? That we've all experienced self-consciousness, where we're so aware of our flaws. We're so aware of what's going on inside of us, or the wrong in us, or we're so aware of those different kinds of things that it actually paralyzes us. Self-awareness is not paralyzation, right? Yeah. Self-consciousness is paralyzation, where it keeps you out of the moment. It keeps you from being present. It actually stifles you and paralyzes. But self-awareness it almost brings in simultaneously the feeling of uncomfortability. It brings hope with it. Because in the feeling of uncomfortability and embracing those things, it brings the hope of, I can actually change this. I can actually step into something new. With God's help, I can actually know myself more. And as I grow to know myself, I know God more and can operate in this world in a different way. Right? So while it is painful, what I've also gotten myself into, the journey of self-awareness, is getting caught in self-consciousness versus self-awareness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's painful, but in the pain and in the death of some of those things where you realize that you're flawed, you can actually make headway and make steps towards greater growth.
Yeah, I can't remember who said it. I was trying to look it up, but she said that in the journey of self-awareness, we have to suspend judgment. Right? We have to stop criticizing ourselves once we discover something that's not what we want. Right. Because it's in the moment of criticizing ourselves that we can become defensive, and we can come in, create an excuse for something, or get angry about something, or just upset about something. But as we grow in self-awareness, we have to be able to stop judging ourselves, right? We have to look at what it is and just acknowledge that that's what it is. Not put a judgment on it. Don't say it's good or it's bad. Right. Just say, every time I get stressed, I run to this. Right. When something goes wrong, I run to this thing. Right. I go to this place. Right. Without putting ourselves in a place of needing to critique ourselves. Right. Right. Because we can think, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that person. Yeah. So I'm not, and then at that moment, we can often, I think, decide to just believe that we're not that person. That, I go to that because of another reason. Right. And then we can make a big excuse, and then that thing stays there. The unhealthy behavior stays there. When we can remove the judgment, when we can look at ourselves without judging ourselves, then we have the opportunity to truly grow in self-awareness in a healthy way.
Right.
And not in self-consciousness.
Right.
Right. But self-awareness. Just be aware.
Right.
Just being aware.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that helps.
Yeah. The consciousness is like an unhealthy fixation on the wrong, while like a self-awareness is, and it's like it's judgment based, while a self-awareness is more, it is what it says. It's, I'm aware of this, right?
Yeah, right.
And now let's just move towards steps, without judgment to remedy it, you know? And I think that's the whole idea of being an observer, and actually looking into those things without judgment. It is difficult to do that.
It's difficult. Yeah.
What I was thinking about while you were talking is the way that God sees us. Like if he knows me perfectly and he's not like critiquing me, then when I'm realizing something about myself, I'm just realizing something that he already knows.
Yeah.
And that he's not critiquing me for. Right? So like to take a stance of almost critiquing myself for something that God already knows about me. You know what I mean? When he's not critiquing me, it's like it's taking a different viewpoint than God's taking on that thing. Because he's like, I've been aware of that since you were born. Like
right.
even before you were born, I've been aware of that, and I'm not critiquing it, right? So we have this tendency to when we come to that awareness, become more self-conscious and critique it, and not really take God's perspective or God's view of actually, I'm not critiquing that. Yeah, that's in you and that's been in you, but let's just grow. You know,
let's grow. Let's work with it.
Let's grow.
That's good. I think that if we could do that every time we became aware of something that we didn't like in ourselves,
right? If
we could say, God, how do you see this? God, help me to see this the way that you see it.
Right.
And that could be painful still, and that might elicit a certain response that maybe will be hard for us.
Right.
But taking that step towards health and towards growth will mean that the rest of our future, the rest of the days that are going to come after are only going to get better. Right? Because if we discover something that's eating away inside of us and we decide to ignore it because it's easier or because it's comfortable or because we're used to it, then eventually that's going to keep rotting away inside. That's going to cause problems down the road. That's going to cause relational issues. That's going to cause personal issues. But if we can take that thing and think, okay, God, how do you see this? And what can I do about it? What's a healthy way for me to change? What's a healthy way for me to change?
Yeah. And then we could actually move towards growth,
Yeah, and actually acknowledge that thing. Confess that thing that we don't want anymore. Just acknowledge that it's there.
And something that's helped me is a lot is something that I've learned. It's just the fact that I even don't want something in me shows me that it's not me.
Right. Yeah.
Like if I didn't care, I wouldn't care. If I didn't care about how I was acting in my life or care about my purpose or care about my emotions inside, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't even think about them. I wouldn't even go on a journey towards self-awareness. But even just the initial step into self-awareness to become aware and to want to grow shows that you're not the person that you don't want to be or that you're so scared of being. Does that make sense? Is that making sense? Like,
yeah, no, and I've thought that, and I've had conversations with people around that same thing.
Right.
Because if I was like bothered because, I always put my right shoe on before my left shoe, and if that was a problem for me and I wanted to do it the other way around, it's, I don't know, that was probably a really bad example.
That was a very bad, super bad example.
Super bad example.
Yeah. But no, maybe it was good. A lot of people could relate to that.
But maybe you're supposed to put, you guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
No, but if there's something inside of me that I do that I have a problem with, and I start judging myself for doing it, it shows me that that's not at the deeper part of me. I don't want to actually do that.
Right.
That's not actually the deepest part of who I am.
Right.
Because otherwise I wouldn't care.
Right.
If I didn't care about that, then I wouldn't care about it. Like we just said.
Yeah.
If I'm caring about doing something and I think I should do this differently.
Right.
Then that shows me I have the capacity to do it differently because deeper within my heart, I want to do it differently.
Right. Exactly.
And that it's going against the deepest parts of me.
Right.
And if those are the parts that are most true, then that isn't part of me.
Right.
You know, and sometimes we have to break off those habits and
Right.
ways of being, but
And that's what brings hope.
right. And there's hope in that because it's like, you're right. This isn't who I am because I don't
Right.
want to do this.
Right. And how often do we actually like stifle our own growth or our ability to actually change because we're so caught up on the fact that we haven't changed yet, you know, or we're so like driven by or beat down by the emotions of how we've failed that we don't actually take joyful steps in towards success.
Yeah.
You know, and I've done that so many times in my life where I get mad at the fact that I have something, and I'm more being mad at where I'm not takes longer than actually just taking a step towards being who I want to be. You know what I'm saying? It's like you take an act of self-awareness. I realize, hey, I have a tendency to, you know, whatever, go to my phone whenever I get into a hard time. And then I'm like, oh, why do I do that? I'm the worst. I can't believe it. You know what I mean? And then I'm so focused on that I can't say, okay, well, what could I do to actually change that? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Or, you know, that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Where it actually allows you, there's a hope in just not remaining in that judgment place. You know, it's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Being able to look at ourselves without judgment helps us change faster and probably come to a better conclusion or decision on how to change.
Right. A healthier conclusion for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
I want to read the scripture before we end. Psalm 39, 23, verse 23 to verse 24. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. Point out anything in me that offends you and lead me along the path of everlasting life. And I think David wrote this, and this is about growing in self-awareness.
Right.
You know, and it's asking God to search me because I don't even know every part of me.
Right.
I don't know all the things inside of me. I don't know everything that's going on. But
the unknown sins, the unknown things I'm doing.
Yeah, but I have blind spots, things that I do that I'm not aware of, but would you search me and help me become aware of those things? Show me my anxious thoughts. What are the things that I'm worried about that I don't even know I'm worried about?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's huge.
And to point out those things in me to help me grow in self-awareness in any way that's not aligned with who you are. I want to know that so I can change, you know, and lead me in the way of everlasting life.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what the journey is about. It's about walking with God into that place of everlasting life, allowing him to lead us into that place of everlasting life where we can live fully as he designed us to live.
Right.
To walk as he designed us to walk. You know, and not to miss out or to disqualify ourselves because we're believing things that aren't true, but to truly know who we are, where we are called to know the purposes that he has for us and to walk in those. And that takes intentionality. It takes growing in self-awareness.
It's huge. That's huge. Yeah. Wow. That's good. That's a good way to. That's a good way to end it. And I love that. I love that God wants to do that for us. You know what I mean? And I believe he answers that prayer when we actually humble ourselves enough to say, you know what? There's probably some things in me that are causing some issues or actually holding me back, and I want to be aware of those things, and I can't change what I don't know. You know?
Yeah.
So once we identify those things and once we know those things, then we can make steps towards actually living better, living more full, going after things that are healthy and good in our lives. And so, yeah, help us, Lord.
Help us, Lord.
Sweet baby
Help me,
Jesus.
Lord.
Help us, Lord.
Help me, Lord.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode 23 of Your Brain on God. We will be back next week not next week, I'll be at camp. The following week for part two of self-awareness, how we relate to people in relationships and how self-awareness helps in relationships. Make sure to follow us on YouTube, on Instagram, on Spotify and iTunes podcasts, TikTok. Follow us on everywhere, and comment.
Yeah, definitely.
Sick.
Say hi.
Yeah, say hi. We love you guys, all of our boggies out there. Have an amazing week, and we will talk to you soon. Peace out.
Peace out.
Later.